Gaza-Israel war timeline. Key events of October 2023, Flashpoint Season 2, Episode 7. Welcome to my podcast, Flashpoint, the show where we delve deep into the most pressing global issues. Can there ever be lasting peace? Can Israel and the Palestinians ever be civil to each other? Stay tuned as we try to answer these questions and many more. Starting on October 7, 2023, the conflict between Israel and Gaza has witnessed several momentous events, including military operations, ceasefires, attacks, and humanitarian crises. This is a timeline highlighting the key events. October 7th, 2023, Hamas launches unexpectedly an invasion. In the early hours of 7/2023, Hamas launched an attack on Israel by infiltrating Israeli territory and firing over 4,000 rockets. This assault targeted both military and civilian areas, resulting in the deaths of 200 individuals and the abduction of around 250 people into Gaza as hostages. The Israeli military was unprepared for the attack due to a calculation of Hamas capabilities and intentions. The invasion, which involved waves of heavily extremists infiltrating by land and air, was so extensive and brutal that the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, were caught off guard. Over 1,000 terrorists from an elite unit in the first wave, followed by additional waves of militants and civilians. The strike resulted in significant casualties and chaos, making it difficult for the IDF to regain control of the situation. Early in the assault, the IDF's Gaza division was overwhelmed, and numerous Israeli military installations and settlements were simultaneously attacked. In the aftermath of the attack, there were calls for a thorough investigation into the military's preparedness and political decision-making. The objective of this embargo was to completely sever Gaza's fuel, food, water, and electrical supplies, thereby exerting immense pressure on Hamas and the populace. Aimed to weaken Hamas operational capabilities and compel organizations, the international community held divergent views on the declaration of war and the implementation of the blockade. While some expressed support for Israel's right to self-defense, others raised concerns about the humanitarian impact on Gaza's civilian population. Evacuation orders October 12, 2002. In anticipation of more intense military operations in the region, the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, ordered the evacuation of northern Gaza, affecting approximately 1.1 million people, comparable to the population of Montana. October 29, 2023, ground invasion begins. Israel commenced a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip, aiming to dismantle Hamas's infrastructure and secure the release of hostages. On October 29, 2023, Israel escalated its military campaign against Hamas by launching a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip. The primary objectives of this invasion were to dismantle Hamas's infrastructure, neutralize its military capabilities, and secure the release of the hostages taken during the initial attack on October 7th. The ground invasion involved the deployment of thousands of Israeli troops, tanks, and armored vehicles into Gaza. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, conducted coordinated assaults on key Hamas positions, including command centers, weapons storage facilities, and tunnels used for smuggling and militant operations. The operation aimed to weaken Hamas's ability to launch further attacks on Israel and to create conditions for the safe recovery of hostages. The invasion was met with fierce resistance from Hamas militants who employed guerrilla tactics and used the urban landscape to their advantage. The fighting resulted in significant casualties on both sides and further exacerbated the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Civilians in Gaza faced immense challenges, including displacement, lack of access to necessities, and the constant threat of violence. On October 12, 2023, the IDF issued evacuation orders for the northern part of Gaza, affecting approximately 1.1 million people, about the population of Montana, equivalent to Montana's population, and instructed them to relocate to safer areas. The IDF issued these evacuation orders to civilian casualties and to more aggressive combat operations against Hamas militants in the northern region. The IDF urged residents to leave the area to avoid being caught in the crossfire of the impending operations. As a result of the evacuation orders, residents faced significant logistical challenges in securing shelter and essentials. Despite the efforts of international authorities and humanitarian organizations to assist the displaced population, the relocation led to a humanitarian crisis. Key events of October 9th and October 12th, 2023 were pivotal in the ongoing conflict, shaping the direction of regional military and humanitarian operations. November 24-30, 2023, hostage exchange and temporary ceasefire. The brief ceasefire resulted in release of 105 hostages and the delivery of minimal humanitarian goods to Gaza. Hamas reached an agreement to temporarily halt hostilities from November 24th to November 30th, 2023, with the help of internationalities to humanitarian relief and hostage release. Israeli foreign hostages were among the 105 freed by Hamas during the ceasefire. This major humanitarian success provided comfort to the families and communities affected by their abduction. The ceasefire also allowed for the provision of humanitarian aid to Gaza. The humanitarian and international organizations made use of the temporary pause in hostilities to give the civilian populace much-needed relief. This included providing those impacted by the conflict with food, medical supplies, and other necessities. Tensions remained high as both sides braced for the prospect of fresh combat despite the brief lull. The ceasefire emphasized the complicated obstacles to establishing enduring peace in the area and the pressing need for a long-term solution to the conflict. December 1st, 2023, resumption of hostilities. Israel and Hamas resumed fierce combat after the truce agreement between the two groups ended on December 1st, 2002. International attempts to broker a more lasting resolution and prolong the ceasefire were unsuccessful, and the conflict swiftly intensified. Intense battles occurred between Hamas militants and Israeli forces in southern Israel and the Gaza Strip, which included ground operations, artillery fire, and airstrikes, resulted in significant casualties and destruction. Civilians on both sides faced increased risks and difficulties due to the ongoing conflict. Israel and Hamas resumed fierce combat after the truce agreement between the two groups ended on December 1st, 2002. International attempts to broker a more lasting resolution and prolong the ceasefire were unsuccessful, and the conflict swiftly intensified. Israel escalated the conflict and caused many deaths and displacements. It launched a bombing campaign on the southern city of Rafah. February 2024, bombing of Rafah. Israel launched a bombing campaign on the southern city of Rafah in February 2024. The ongoing battle saw a major increase in intensity during this campaign, leading to many civilian casualties and displacement. Numerous structures, including houses and mosques, were destroyed in a series of bombings on Rafah by the Israeli Air Force. The bombings were part of Hamas's larger military plan for Hamas's regional infrastructure and operations. There was extensive destruction because of the attacks. Estimates state that more than 83 people, including women and children, were killed. As the bombings worsened the already dire circumstances, the humanitarian situation quickly deteriorated. May 7, 2024, seizure of Rafah border crossing. The crucial Rafah border crossing was taken over by Israeli forces, strengthening the blockade of Gaza and limiting the flow of people and goods. Israeli forces take control of the crucial Rafah border crossing, which connects Egypt and the Gaza Strip, on May 7, 2024. This calculated action tightened the blockade on Gaza even further, restricting the movement of people and goods and obstructing a vital humanitarian route. Israel's larger operation against the southern city of Rafah included the capture of the Rafah border crossing. After entering the region, Israeli troops and tanks engaged in fierce combat with Hamas fighters. The aim of the operation was to cut off Hamas's supplies and prevent organizations from using the border to carry out terrorist attacks. For the civilian populace, who were already dealing with acute shortages of essentials, the crossing closure presented new difficulties. October 16, 2024, killing of Yahya Sinwar. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, announced on October 16, 2024, that Hamas leader Yassin had been killed, marking a significant milestone in Israel's military objectives. Sinwar, the mastermind behind the October 7, 2023, attack on Israel, was one of the country's most wanted individuals. He was killed during routine sweep by IDF forces in Rafah, southern Gaza. A gunfight ensued when the military encountered Sinwar and two other insurgents. Sinwar sustained a fatal gunshot wound to the head and has dealt a serious blow to Hamas's operational capacity and leadership. These incidents demonstrate the complexity and persistence of the battle, and they have significant implications for the region's military and humanitarian conditions. Please inform me if you need any additional information or if there are any other events to include. His identity was later confirmed through DNA tests and dental records. Sinwar's death was hailed as a turning point in Israel's military strategy. January 19, 2025, ceasefire agreement. A ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas ended active hostilities that had persisted for more than 15 days, about 2 weeks, on January 19, 2025. The United States, Qatar, and among international mediators who facilitated the accord. The objective of the ceasefire is to pave the way for discussions regarding the future reconstruction and governance of Gaza. The initial phase of the ceasefire involved the release of hostages and prisoners. Israel released approximately 2,000 Palestinian prisoners, and Hamas released 33 Israeli captives. Furthermore, the truce enabled humanitarian aid to Gaza, providing much-needed relief to the civilian population. February 5, 2025, U.S. involvement. When U.S. President Donald Trump declared that the United States will take over the Gaza Strip in a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, it sparked debates regarding future governance and international engagement in the area. On February 5, 2025, President Donald Trump made a statement during a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He declared that the U.S. would take over the Gaza Strip, sparking debates about future regional governance and international engagement. Trump's plan called for redoing Gaza and transforming it into a thriving region, which he referred to as the Riviera of the Middle East. Reactions to the idea were divided. Some viewed it as a bold attempt to bring stability and prosperity to the Gaza Strip, while others criticized it as a contentious impractical. March 1, 2025 stalled ceasefire negotiations. Negotiations between Israel and Hamas to extend the second phase of the ceasefire remained stagnant, with no indication of resumption. Mediators from the states, Qatar, and Egypt continued their efforts to facilitate dialogue. Negotiations between Israel and Hamas to extend the second phase of the truce had not advanced by March 1, 2025. The ceasefire's first phase had ended, and neither party could agree on the conditions for the next one. Mediators from the United States, Qatar, and Egypt continued their efforts to facilitate dialogue and achieve a resolution. It was unclear whether the ceasefire would last and whether more fighting would break out because of the lack of progress. March 2, 2025 humanitarian aid cut off. Israel halted the delivery of supplies and aid to Gaza in an attempt to pressure Hamas into accepting a new ceasefire plan endorsed by the United States. Hamas condemned the move as cheap extortion and war, complicating negotiations. On March 2, 2025, Israel announced its decision to halt all supplies and relief from entering Gaza. This measure aimed to pressure Hamas into accepting a new ceasefire proposal backed by the United States, which intended to extend the ceasefire through Ramadan and Passover. The proposal that half of the remaining hostages would be released at the start of the extended ceasefire period, with the rest to be upon reaching a permanent ceasefire agreement's move, condemned by Hamas as cheap extortion and a war crime, furthered peace negotiations and exacerbated the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. These events underscore the challenges in a long-term resolution of the conflict. Gaza has a severe humanitarian catastrophe, the conflict, with many people being displaced and suffering significant losses. The hardship of the civilian population has been exacerbated by continuous conflicts and blockades that have impeded efforts to provide humanitarian supplies. With stalled peace negotiations, persistent humanitarian issues, and an unclear course toward a long settlement, the situation remains unstable as of March 2, 2025. As of March 2, 2025, recent events have resulted in significant changes to Hamas's leadership structure. Here's an overview of the current leaders, their rankings, and other pertinent information. Current leaders of Hamas, ranked from most to least powerful. Khalil al-Hayya. Following the assassination of Yahya Sinwar on October 16, 2024, Khalil al-Hayya assumed the role of acting de facto leader of Hamas. Previously serving as the deputy chairman of the Hamas Political Bureau, al-Hayya now oversees political and foreign affairs, with direct oversight of Gaza-related matters. And the Wikipedia.org. Khaled Mashal, former chairman of the Hamas Political Bureau, 1996-2017, Mashal was appointed as the acting leader of Hamas after Sinwar's death. He continues to play a significant role in the organization's external relations and strategic decisions. Zahir Jabaran, currently serving as the chairman of the Hamas Political Bureau in the West Bank, Jabbaran is a key figure in the organization's operations within that region. Mohammed Ismail Darwish. As the chairman of the Hamas Shura Council since October 2023, Darwish holds a vital position in the organization's internal governance. Mohammed Sinwar, the younger brother of the late Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed is a prominent commander within the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas. He is considered one of the potential successors for future leadership roles. Hamas factions in Gaza and the West Bank. Ceasefire status and negotiations. The initial phase of the ceasefire, which began on January 19, 2025, is set to expire on March 1, 2025. As of now, there is no specified date and hour for the end of the ceasefire, as negotiations for its extension or a new agreement are ongoing. Recent reports indicate that talks on the second phase of the ceasefire have made no progress, with uncertainty about whether discussions will resume. Stance on advancing peace talks. Hamas has expressed frustration over the lack of progress in the second phase of ceasefire negotiations, accusing Israel of delaying talks and violating agreements. The group has rejected proposals to extend the first phase of the ceasefire, emphasizing the need to address core issues in subsequent discussions. Israel, on the other hand, has shown support for a U.S. proposal to extend the current ceasefire through significant religious periods, but Hamas insists on focusing on the next phase of negotiations. Likelihood of IDF strikes post-ceasefire. Given the stalled negotiations and the expiration of the current ceasefire, there is a heightened risk of renewed hostilities. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly preparing for the potential resumption of conflict, indicating that the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, may launch strikes on Gaza if the ceasefire collapses. March 8, 2025, an Israeli airstrike in Rafah, southern Gaza, killed 2 Palestinians. The strike targeted individuals attempting to retrieve a drone that had crossed into Gaza. This followed another airstrike the previous day, which targeted suspected militants planting explosives. Ceasefire negotiations. Talks to extend the ceasefire are ongoing in Cairo, mediated by Egypt and Qatar. Hamas has indicated positive indicators for the second phase of the ceasefire, which could involve the release of remaining hostages and further steps toward ending the conflict. Humanitarian crisis. The blockade on Gaza remains in place, exacerbating the humanitarian situation. Israel has demanded the release of hostages as a condition for lifting the blockade. Humanitarian crisis. The blockade on Gaza remains in place, exacerbating the humanitarian situation. Israel has demanded the release of hostages as a condition for lifting the blockade. Hostage release announcement. Hamas announced its agreement to release Eden Alexander, a 21-year-old American-Israeli soldier captured during the October 7, 2023 attacks, along with the bodies of 4 deceased dual nationals. This decision marked the second phase of a ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel, facilitated by the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt.